Welcome back to the lecture series component of your course on motivating management. When we last spoke, you learned just how and why motivation is such an important component of management, regardless of who you are managing. You also learned about human needs. In today's lecture, we'll aim to understand motivation more closely by breaking it into 5 key components. We'll also return to the model of motivation. Let's dive right in. In our last lecture, I told you that people use energy to satisfy their needs. However, I also mentioned that just because someone has the right amount of energy doesn't mean they will apply that energy in an efficient or useful way. Sometimes people use their energy to the best of their abilities to suit their personal needs. Yet sometimes an individual's needs differ from an organization's needs. For example, if I was asked by my manager to complete my annual self-evaluation by Friday, and also asked to complete a project for a client as soon as I possibly can, it may better serve the organization if I work on the project for the client before my own self-evaluation. But since the self-evaluation has a more concrete deadline, I put my energy there for better or for worse. Motivation is a product of 5 components. Let's discuss each of these, starting with actions. An action is something you do. When you put energy into a particular task, you are acting. My job entails managing, strategic planning, editing, writing, and teaching. On any given day, I partake in actions in all of these areas. They all require my energy, and they all require me to stay motivated. Some of my tasks, particularly the managing and teaching, also require me to motivate others. The next component is results. Results are consequences, outcomes, the products of our actions. If my action right now is writing this lecture, the result will be the finished lecture, which you are now participating in. If I didn't put action into creating the lecture, there would be no results. Put simply, energy applied to actions produces results. Evaluations are the next component of motivation. Evaluations are defined as assessments of the value that results create. Do you remember how just a few minutes ago I mentioned that one of my tasks requiring energy was the creation of a yearly self-evaluation? This is a perfect example of an evaluation. By considering all of the things I did over the course of a year and analyzing them for their worth and success, I evaluate the results of my actions. In order for any results to be evaluated, they must be observed and measured. In organizational settings, the more important the result is, the more likely that result will be observed and measured. But don't be mistaken. The observation and measurement of results takes energy and effort. It in itself is an action, and organizations rarely have the time to measure or observe all of the results they would like to, or even should. Furthermore, some results, such as customer satisfaction, are difficult to measure accurately. There is an important distinction between measures and evaluations. A measure determines how much there is of a result. Evaluations, on the other hand, determine the quality or how good or bad the result is. Evaluations can be formal or informal, and they can be accurate or inaccurate. It is also important to remember that different people evaluate differently. Outcomes are the 4th component of motivation. Outcomes are the good and bad things that happen as a result of the evaluations of our actions. Promotions, recognition, pay raises, benefits, and feelings of achievement are all examples of outcomes. On the other end of the spectrum, so are criticism, pay cuts, and demotions. Most of these are examples of outcomes that come to us by way of other people, usually our managers. However, we can also bring outcomes on ourselves. If, after meeting an especially tight deadline, I treat myself to a glass of high-end Cabernet, this is an outcome too. Can you think of any other outcomes that come about in respect to evaluations? When have you been evaluated? What outcomes did you experience? The fifth and final component of motivation is need satisfaction, which we discussed in our first lecture. Remember that need satisfaction is a temporary state determined by what happened to us fairly recently. I just closed the window and am no longer cold. But if the temperature drops another 10 degrees this evening, I may get cold again, even with the window closed. Need satisfaction is the product of outcomes. If we expect a lot of need satisfaction from an outcome, that outcome is attractive. If I expect that the outcome of my performance appraisal will be a significant pay raise, which will go a long way in satisfying my need for money, I am invested to do what it takes to get that outcome. Do you follow? If, on the other hand, I expect that the outcome of my performance evaluation will not be a needed pay raise, but instead my boss half-heartedly saying, "Good job," which doesn't do a thing to help meet my needs, I am not invested in the outcome and will likely not put energy into the action of creating a high-quality performance evaluation. Motivation is future-oriented. We are motivated to do something, or lack motivation to do something, because of what we anticipate our actions yielding. We are motivated based on what we expect to happen. And as I'm sure you're well aware of, sometimes things don't happen as we expected them to, as was the case with that green car I had to have. When you put all 5 components of motivation together, you get this formula. Motivation is high when a person has sufficient energy and believes he or she can apply this energy to actions that will produce results that will be positively evaluated and lead to outcomes that satisfy needs. Simplified a bit, we exert ourselves when we believe that exertion will lead to things that will satisfy our needs. Now that we have discussed the components of motivation, let's look at how these 5 components connect to determine how well motivation is working. As we discuss different connections between components, keep this essential formula in mind. We put energy into actions. Our actions produce results. These results are evaluated, and the evaluations produce outcomes that may or may not lead to need satisfaction. Commit that sequence of events to memory right now, and you'll do fine with the connections we're about to discuss. The first connection I'd like to consider is that of actions and results. This connection is the product of how a person's actions control the result that he or she produces. Let's consider an example. If I go to the gym with the intention of burning 500 calories on a stationary bike that counts calories burned, I can control the results through my actions. If I get tired after burning 400 calories, I have the ability to choose to keep going. My calorie-burning results are within my control. How I act is directly related to my results. If I come home from the gym starving with the intention of making and eating an entire East Coast-style pizza, but I have neither the means nor the ability to make that pizza, it won't matter how long I try. My actions will not yield the results I want. Do you see the difference? If not, try to digest it again. One more thing to keep in mind in terms of the action-to-results connection. People are motivated when their actions can control their results. But don't expect them to be motivated if their actions cannot control their results. I will be motivated to burn those extra 100 calories if I know the burning of those calories is absolutely in my control. All I need to do is pedal that bike for 10 more minutes. But in terms of making that pizza, I don't think it would matter how hard or long I tried. I couldn't do it, and therefore I am not motivated. Next, let's consider the connection between results and evaluations. This connection is the perceived relationship between the amount of the result that is produced and the favorableness of the evaluations by a given evaluator. If I am thinking about putting in extra hours at work this week with no additional pay to get some important work done, I will be more motivated to work those extra hours if I think the results of my work will yield a favorable evaluation by my boss. If, on the other hand, he doesn't even notice or care that I put in extra hours, I will not be motivated to work extra hours. In the workplace, we need to know how different results are valued in order for motivation to be high. I need to know what it's worth to my boss that I work to get the job done, no matter what it takes, if I am going to really do whatever it takes to get the job done. If I don't know what value my actions and the results of those actions will yield, I may very well have a misunderstanding of my priorities. Now, let's consider the connection between evaluations and outcomes. I think this relationship is a bit easier to understand. If you think the outcome of your evaluation will be favorable, you are more motivated. If you are uncertain what the outcome of your evaluation will be, you are less motivated. If I am told that hard work and a positive evaluation will yield a large pay raise, I am motivated. However, if I am not told that I will be rewarded with favorable outcomes, I may not work as hard, and because I don't put the energy into my actions, I may not have a favorable evaluation. Outcomes that are not tied to performance will have little or no effect on the motivation to do a better job. If the outcomes of my evaluations will be the same, let's say minimal to no pay raise, why would I be motivated to work hard to produce a positive evaluation? The connection between evaluations and outcomes must be high in order for one to be motivated. Let's look at just one more connection, that between outcomes and need satisfaction. As with all of the connections we've looked at so far, only a high connection will yield motivation. The outcome to need satisfaction connection is the perceived relationship between the level of an outcome and the level of anticipated need satisfaction. Let's return to the idea of my self-evaluation. If I think that working hard and adequately capturing this work in my evaluation will yield outcomes that will satisfy my needs, I am motivated. Put more concretely, if I believe that my hard work will be recognized with outcomes that include a promotion, a private office, and a pay raise, I will be motivated. The reason for my motivation is because the outcomes satisfy my needs. The promotion satisfies my need for self-worth. The private office satisfies my need for solitude and quiet. And the pay raise satisfies my need for more money in the bank to pay off my student loans. One of managers' biggest challenges is learning what outcomes are effective for different people. I just shared the outcomes that meet my needs, but someone else will likely have different needs, or if they do have the same needs, those needs will vary in strength. Think about yourself as a student for the moment. What are your needs? What are the outcomes that will satisfy those needs? Are you motivated? Why or why not? In order for motivation to be high, all of the components of motivation must be favorable. Motivation is a process. Remember that we put energy into actions. Our actions produce results. These results are evaluated, and the evaluations produce outcomes that may or may not lead to need satisfaction. If even one of these steps isn't going well, the whole process suffers. Baking a cake is very much a process. You must mix the ingredients together in the proper order. You must grease the cake pan. You must heat the oven and then cook the cake for the appropriate amount of time. Finally, you must take the cake out of the oven. Say you forgot an essential ingredient like baking powder. Your cake wouldn't rise, and you wouldn't have much of a cake. Say you forgot to heat the oven. Your cake wouldn't cook. Or say you left the cake in the oven too long. Your cake would burn. So you see, all of the steps in cake baking must be followed accurately and favorably. Similarly, all of the components that relate to motivation must be favorably connected in order for motivation to exist. Congratulations, you've made it to the end of another lecture. Today we talked about the components of motivation and looked at how those components connect in order to make motivation high or low. Next time we'll discuss plans to improve motivation as well as how to diagnose actions to results connections. I'll see you again soon. Until then, think about your own motivation levels.